Population 71,406. So we have a lot of rural area. So to the west of Port Stephens, so we're approximately 1,000 kilometres, square kilometres. Rural areas to the west, and then to the east we have beautiful beaches, with the Tomaree Peninsula being a very popular holiday destination, and it almost doubles its population over Christmas time. We provide approximately 35,000 garbage services per week, and about 85% of those households are entitled to a curbside service. And all of our waste collection services are currently contracted. So our challenge, the on-call challenge. I think most of us in the room today recognise that cleanups are a pretty topical issue for councils. So if you have them, most of the time you're asking yourself why, and if you don't have them, most of the time your community is asking you why. So my presentation today is just a small snippet of the experience that we've had at Port Stephens. So the challenge started for us back in 2015, when after 20 years we changed from one scheduled bulky and one scheduled green waste to 2 on-call curbside collections per year. Why we changed? I guess it came from expectations from our community and our councillors that we delivered a service that had better outcomes, and we consulted with our community prior to our new collection contract in 2015, and cleanup was the #1 topic that they wanted to talk about. What we wanted was to continue to offer a convenient service to our residents to get rid of their waste, regardless of their circumstance. So we have a very different makeup in Port Stephens. We have some very low socio-economic areas that have a lot of Department of Housing, and we have an ageing population. So regardless of their circumstances and the amount of waste that they needed to get rid of, we really did need to offer them a service that wasn't based on their ability to self-haul waste to a facility. We wanted to stop the unsightly appearance of waste out on the curb for 52 weeks of the year, especially in the Tomaree Peninsula, which was our biggest economy, where tourism is our biggest economy. And we also wanted to supply a service that people could use. So a large percentage of that Tomaree Peninsula are holiday rentals. So it's very difficult to try and provide a service that the residents and the tenants living in houses, the holiday makers that own the properties can all use, and how you communicated those scheduled cleanups to them. And we wanted to reduce the amount of waste that we were sending to landfill. So this dream was born to offer a limousine instead of a taxi, an on-call collection that you could book when you wanted it, so at your convenience, rather than being told the date of your cleanup. So although we had a scheduled service in place for over 20 years, we still had residents that didn't do the right thing and placed waste out, that didn't follow the process and putting their waste out weeks in advance of the scheduled cleanup. They'd place out non-conforming waste, and in some instances we had houses or streets who claimed that they weren't receiving the service. So whether it was contractor error, or failure to receive the flyer, they claimed they didn't know the cleanup was on, or that we didn't provide that service. So these scheduled cleanups resulted in significant amounts of complaints for the weeks that they were on, and basically misery for our customer service team and our waste team. It also left us with no resources once the cleanup was over. So our contractor at that time would bring the trucks in for that 6 to 8 week cleanup period, and then they would move on to the next collection. But ultimately that left us with no resources to clean up these missed services that residents were claiming that they were entitled to. So we had people dumping non-conforming waste on other people's piles. We had people scavenging through piles to get reusable materials. We had kids taking materials to build cubby houses down in bushland and leaving them there. And we had the great scrap metal scavengers coming through at all hours of the night, disturbing people's piles. The on-call cleanup ticked all the boxes. It still delivered that curbside service that was convenient for everyone to use. You could still put out all the same waste types that you were previously able to over the 2 scheduled cleanups, but now you could put them in a mixed pile for your 2 on-call. We allow residents and owners to both book the service. And it was an easy to book service, so we had the same terms and conditions, so you should have placed your waste out in the same ways, same materials were accepted, certain lengths, being able to be picked up by 2 people. We tried to minimise the amount of changes that we made. And most importantly, we didn't want that waste. The waste wouldn't be out on the streets for weeks leading up to the scheduled cleanup. It wouldn't look untidy anymore, and we wouldn't have people scavenging through it. So resource recovery. That was probably one of our two objectives when we started our new collection contract in 2015. We really wanted to improve that figure. We'd previously done an audit on our curbside cleanup and found that we'd quite a lot of recyclable materials that we could recover. So when we went out to tender, we did ask for a few prices on a couple of different models, and ultimately what we found was that it was cheaper for us to sort the waste at our facility than it was to send multiple trucks out, especially given the size of our LGA. Our previous contractor didn't really keep records on the amount of metal that was being recovered, so it's estimated that about 2% of our previous curbside tonnages was being recycled. So we built a shed, we purchased additional equipment, and we hired additional staff to sort our waste at the transfer station. And in 2015 and 16, we recycled 25% of our cleanup waste. So that's the green waste, the mattresses, cardboard, and the scrap metal. So as you can see from the graph, our resource recovery does fluctuate. It's currently sitting at 28% for this financial year. It's been as high as 32%. We've reviewed this data a few times, trying to just pinpoint what the issue is with that fluctuation, and we believe we've got a few ideas, and I'll touch on that in the next couple of slides. So the challenge, well, I'll be honest, there's been a few. Some we anticipated, some we found as a bit of a surprise. So I guess 20 years of a scheduled cleanup is a long habit to break. Essentially, long-term residents were just used to putting their waste out at the same time every year. June, July was their scheduled bulk waste cleanup, and they just anticipated that they would put it out at that time. And we have a bit of a monkey see, monkey do mentality. So, you're driving around and you see that your neighbour a few streets over has their waste out, and you go, oh, the cleanup must be coming. I've got to rush home right now, put my whole house out on the curb just in case I miss it. And unfortunately, that's what's been happening. People. There's always going to be people in the community that no matter how much you consult with them about the process and educate and communicate them, they're still just not going to follow your process. It's about roughly 5% of the population, but unfortunately they do cause you a considerable amount of time dealing with them. Education. It's a continual cycle that we've had to do. And the battle for us has been what, when and how. There's been a lot of ways that we could have attacked it. We started with trying to just promote the new service. We didn't think we needed to put that much emphasis on the change in service purely because we'd had a clean-up service. We weren't taking anything away. There was no change to entitlements. So we advertised how you use the service. We then had to move to how you book the service and concentrating more on that and how you follow the process. And we've used a variety of methods from brochures, online videos, social media, radio, and now we're doing a lot of face-to-face education. I can't really say that one method is working better than another. Staffing levels have definitely affected our resource recovery. That's saying the right person for the right job definitely applies in this case. We've found when we've had really engaged staff who have a goal and are looking at ways to improve the service, we find our resource recovery really does hit that peak. Unfortunately, staff shortages, leave that you weren't expecting, definitely does fluctuate the success of our resource recovery with our cleanup. And the size of our LGA, obviously we're not a big council in terms of population or service numbers, but we are quite large, so that demographic of having to drive quite a long way from one end to the other does really affect the amount of cleanups we can do in a day, and obviously the timeframes in which it's delivered and flows onto the sorting. So our tonnages have risen in the last couple of years, and in 18-19 it looks set to be on par or maybe a little bit lower than last year. Usage does continue to grow, and unfortunately it does fluctuate with seasonality. From November through to about March, it doesn't recover to about March or April, and during this time our residents can sometimes wait up to a month for a service. You wouldn't normally think that would be a big problem, but unfortunately what happens is that that flow-on effect is that we have people who are putting their waste out, then they call up, get told that they've got to wait a month for their collection, and so the waste is sitting out on the curb, people dump on it, people complain about it, and we've just got a new level of, a new thing that we've got to deal with. So, and we find that those complaints during that period are even higher. We also don't promote the service at all at any time from about September through to April, because obviously we don't really want to encourage more bookings than we already have. We do a lot of rejuggling with our days to handle that. So our contractor's fabulous, so we move days around. Sometimes we actually have to introduce additional resources as well, trying to keep that wait time round. And we do that juggling because we don't want to have that waste on curb problem that we are experiencing. So where are we at? With the previous scheduled cleanup, we probably had complaints mainly about missed services and some about illegally dumped waste on the curb for about 10 to 12 weeks for the bulk waste and about 2 to 4 weeks for the green waste. We now receive complaints year round about waste on curb. Previously with the scheduled cleanup, any waste that was placed out on the curb illegally outside of a scheduled cleanup was dealt with by our waste compliance team. Our complaints rose by 30% the first year of the new service and a further 67% in 2016 and 17. So we upped the ante on our education. So we use stickers on piles. As you said, they look a bit similar. And we do that for a couple of reasons. We send out the terms and conditions, but we do that so if a neighbour sees somebody with their waste out a little early and they've got a sticker, they know they don't need to ring us to complain that someone's placed waste out. And we also see it as an education tool that other people seeing it see that it's booked in, and that triggers that word booked. Oh, I actually do need to call up about that. We've sent mail outs reminding people that they need to dial before putting out their pile, and we've reinforced that with social media, newspaper adverts. And we use radio advertising during our slower periods just to promote the service and how to use it. And we've had inspections of known hotspots, and these do occur mainly in our lower socioeconomic areas where we find that people are always putting waste out on the curb. So we log the complaints. If they've got a collection booked in, we mark them off. If they don't, we send them a letter. And we give them 14 days to book the service. Unfortunately, we've had to allow that time frame because the mail just takes so long to get to people now. From there, if they didn't book in after that 14 days, we were using a number of resources to inspect, and then we would follow it up. And it would either be if they had a collection available, we would force them in if there was no action. If they didn't have a booking, it would go down to our waste compliance team. So obviously with every process, there's always variables that affect the success. In 17-18, our complaints actually dropped, which was a good thing. And we thought that was probably due to, the fact that we did a lot more education trying to get people doing the right thing. And that seemed to be helping. However, we were still getting a number of complaints, and unfortunately that was just not something that could be resourced anymore in our waste compliance team. So we applied to use our Waste Less Recycle More money to hire a curbside waste compliance officer, and that's their dedicated job. And the position commenced in December, and it's a proactive and a reactive position that's designed to inspect, follow up and do that face-to-face education with people that are doing the wrong thing. Currently, the complaints are up 42%. It's not a figure I'm too concerned with at the moment because we believe a lot of that's being driven by the proactive work that officer's doing. So she actually logs a lot of those complaints now rather than them coming from the resident. And what we have found is when a complaint is logged, because we have one person dealing with it, we're closing those requests off a lot quicker than what we had previously. It's also this person's role to help us if people put non-conforming waste out or if they've got waste, too much waste presented that we can't pick up and they've used all their collections. So they actually take that role on if we can't get them to remove the waste from the curb. So where to from here? Obviously continual and meaningful education in a variety of ways, continuing to let people know about the service, how to use the service and what will happen if you don't follow the process. We need to keep building better relationships. There's a lot of stakeholders in this complicated system, residents, owners, real estates, Department of Housing, Defence Housing and other housing bodies. And if we continue to build good relationships with them, then obviously it helps us get these problems sorted out a lot quicker, especially when we're dealing with people who have waste out on the curb, but they don't have any collections left. In terms of data, we've only really just started collecting data. And so now with the new officer, we want to sort of understand a lot of different aspects of what she's doing. And so we're working out what we need and collecting a whole lot of data just to try and better understand the process and what we can continue to do to improve it. Compliance, obviously we don't want to get that big stick out, but I think we all know that sometimes that's what has to happen, especially if you've got people who are continuing to do the wrong thing, or they're just not wanting to respond to you when you are having those interactions with them about the fact that they're not following the process. And obviously continuous improvement. We want to continue to improve our service and that we're supplying to the community. So what to do if you're thinking of, what to think about, if you're planning to change. So if you have a big enough council area and you can sustain more than one service, then I definitely recommend that. We still get a lot of feedback that people would prefer a voucher and be able to self-haul their waste when it suits them. It also helps if you have hard to access properties, or for us, when you have those seasonality issues where the service is at its peak and people are waiting a long time but would happily take it themselves. Unfortunately, you do need to consider your funding model if you go down this scheme, because it is our understanding that you can't fund this under the domestic waste charge. Have an education plan. We honestly didn't realise that we would need to spend so much time and attention on this change to the service, and that obviously was a mistake, and obviously keep trying different things. Know your community, understand the makeup, so the ageing population, the socio-economic makeup of your community. It really does help you if you have a plan how to deal with these people. Talk to your stakeholders early, so get them involved, make sure they understand the role they play in your process. It definitely helps you in the long run. Talk to other councils like ours and RIDE, because they've obviously done some really great things. Every council will have a different story, and learning their story is obviously going to help you. Have a good process in place and be flexible about changing it if it's not quite working. And don't underestimate what resources you'll need. And I'm not just talking about trucks and drivers. Think about how you're going to deliver the service, how you're going to book the platforms online and phone, and how you're going to minimise the impact it has on your resources, like your customer service and your admin staff. So we currently have 30% of our cleanups booked online, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for us, that's over 300 phone calls a month that are not making it through to our contractors' customer service centre. And so that really does make a difference. So thank you very much.